Hey everybody, so my last video I did was on sport anchors and the different types of sport anchors you can have while you're out climbing. And so I wanted to make the next video to talk about how to clean sport anchors. This video is more for beginner climbers that maybe took a single course at a climbing gym or some sort of club or anything to act as a supplement for them just to review their skills. Maybe it's been a long winter and they're getting out again for the first time in spring or so, and so they want to just refresh their skills and go over ways how to do these things safely and what the industry asks for. This isn't like, I don't want anyone to watch this and just say, oh, I can go out and sport climb now, because there's a little bit of nuance to this, and it is really nice to have a professional over your shoulder at least once telling you what you're doing poorly, wrong, or ways to improve whatever you're doing. So with that being said, I'm going to get straight into this. First thing I'm going to talk about is really what you need on your harness while you're, or before you go up and clean your sport anchor. In this scenario, we started on the ground, and either you or someone else led up, set up a top rope, lowered down, cleaned all the gear, so now there's just a top rope left. And now it's your job to climb up on top rope, back up to the anchor, and clean the anchor and rappel back down. I'm going to show you actually two different ways. One where you rappel down, and then one where you lower down. Lowering down is really nice when you have another person there that's either as experienced or more experienced than you, and you can just quickly go down because it is a quicker method, and some might argue safer. But rappelling down is also a really good skill if you are the most experienced person out there, or you don't trust the person who's belaying you to lower you, or even if you're guiding. I do it a lot while guiding where I don't trust whoever's belaying me to lower me, but I also do it a lot also while guiding when I'm with another guide and I can just have them lower me down real fast. So it's really good. These two different types of cleaning come in handy pretty well. And me personally, in my own climbing, I prefer to lower off because generally that's faster. Now it will depend a bit on your area that you're climbing at, where it's rappelling is more acceptable than lowering off is more acceptable. But the whole world of climbing is kind of moving away from that idea in favor of just going with one more safer method. And nowadays AMGA and various other organizations like that will recommend lowering off rather than rappelling, because it is a little bit safer, a little bit less chance for things to go wrong while you're up there. But take with that what you will and enjoy the video, and if you always have a question, you can leave a comment for me and I'll try to get back to you. Okay, so here is the bare minimum of what I want on my harness. I want some sort of personal anchor device. I want my ATC with a locker, or whatever I use for rappelling. And then I want a sort of third hand. This can either be cord, this hollow block, or some other thing. And then you want a locking carabiner with that. Additionally, I know I have this on a non-locker, but I want a locking carabiner with my personal anchor system, which I'm going to show you how to make. Another thing that a lot of people climb with, especially in the single pitch world, is a personal anchor system. And I am going to show you what I use this for and how I use it, but for the sake of sort of covering all the bases, I want to show you how to make a personal anchor out of a double length sling if you aren't aware of how to do that. Alright, so I got my double length right here, and I got my harness. First thing I like to do in order to build my personal anchor system along, it will also become my rappel extension later on, is I find the bone and I slide out. Sorry, bar tacking. I'm really trying to get in the habit of calling that a bar tacking. But I slide out, a few inches away, and this is the point that I bring in through my 2 points of my harness, just like I'm tying into the rope. Take the long end, put it through the short end in a girth hitch. And then what happens is this sucks the bone really close to my harness and keeps it out of the way of any sort of knots I may tie later on. Now for this, next you want to do is slide out about 9 inches or so from your harness. And here you can tie a knot. You have a couple options of what knots to tie. A lot of people will do an overhand. Me personally, my preference is over a bite knot. So I take all 4 strands, loop it around, put it right back through. And then I have a little bite right here, which is what I'm going to use to clip into my ATC. And then I also have my longer extension that I clip into the anchor with. One thing you want to watch out for in these, in this extension, you don't want to tie a knot like this. Let me see what I did there. Here, I'll tie it from another angle too. Yeah, so avoid that knot, because that's what we call a slip knot. And the minute you clip this in, you're going to just slip, and then this whole thing is going to pop out. So by grabbing all 4 strands and tying those into a knot, that means that that knot's not going anywhere. And you can always test this just by yanking like this, because if you tie a slip knot, it'll slip right out. But you shouldn't have that problem if you practice. Alright, cool. So I have my anchor all ready to go. What I'll do is I'll take my ATC, and I'll just use that carabiner to clip it all out of the way, because I won't need it while I'm climbing up. So just get it out of the way for now. And then all I need to do is tie into the rope, and I'll be ready to go. Okay, so once again, I don't really have the best setup for this. I just have these 2 little clips on the wall that I'm pretending are bolts. A lot of times in nature, you'll find bolts with chains coming down, and so these quick draws right here are going to simulate my chains that are coming down. This is going to be the bottom link of my chain. I have a picture imposed for you guys to see what I mean by that. But so these are going to be these locking carabiners. I'm going to pretend are just big loops of metal that I have to put my rope through. So first thing I did is, again, I top roped up. Here you go. Here's my rope. There you go, up to the master point. And one thing I can do is, if the stance isn't super friendly, or I can't really keep my balance too well, I just call out take, and then the belayer will hold me, and I can pull out my personal anchor and clip in, and then lower onto it. But let's say that I have a decent enough stance so that way I could actually pull this thing out. There you go, and I'll pull out a locking carabiner. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip this into my master point. Yeah, see that? There you go. Clip it into my master point. And at this point, I can either ask for some slack or lower, or sit down onto this. There you go. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but pretend I'm sitting down onto this master point. I can even make this. There we go. So now you can see I'm definitely on my personal anchor system. So I'm clipped in to, here's my anchor, my personal anchor. It's clipped into my top roping anchor, which is equalized on 2 separate points. So that's my redundancy coming down to the master point. At this point, I can call off belay, and you hear belay off. I personally like to just immediately take my rope off of the anchor. Just helps keep things neat. And also it gives me more materials if I need them for whatever reason. Extra locking carabiner, you know. I'm going to grab from my knot. It's always better to pull up more than, or too much than too little. So I'm going to pull up like 8 feet or so and tie a bite knot, figure 8, overhand, sometimes a clove hitch. I just do a clove hitch, whatever. And you can clip this into your harness. Some schools will say clip it into your belay loop, and if I was still being belayed, that could add an extra bit of redundancy. If this whole thing ripped out for whatever reason, I could be caught by my belayer. But since I called off belay, it doesn't really matter anyway, so I can just clip this to my gear loop. Now I'm going to untie my figure 8 knot, and untie the 8 part too. Okay, so at this point I'm going to pass the rope through the bottom links of the chain, and right here I can tie my stopper knot, so that way if I drop the rope again it can slide and it'll get hung up right here. So that kind of helps close the system. Keep the rope held in one hand though to keep it nice and in your hand. I'm going to undo that knot that I had securing the rope to my harness. You can see why I had that knot there. It was just for the sake of not dropping the rope. And I'm going to pull rope up. Now people will say different things about this. Everything gets the job done. One option is pull the rope until I see the middle mark or where the pattern changes up here, so I know I have 30 meters on one side and 30 meters on the other. Another option is to pull rope through until you can see it touch the ground. That's usually the one I like to do. If you can't see it touch the ground, another thing you can do is have your partner down there call up to you when the rope has hit the ground, because then you know you'll just rappel straight down. Me personally, I pull up a bundle in my hand, chuck it, watch it go down, and then just keep on pulling rope through and let the weight of the rope pull it down until I see it hit the ground. Most of the time you can see it hit the ground. Alright, so I'm at the point where I'm ready to rappel now. What I gotta do is I gotta sort of pull myself. Yeah, okay, so I can remove that now just so that way you guys can see how it looks a lot more clear. Normally I would just be sitting on this extended. And if I did want to clip myself in right here, I would use another locker because that's kind of a critical locker, right? So I just did that for making things a bit more clear. But now you can see I have my loop here. Going to clip my ATC with locker onto that loop. I'm also going to pull out my third hand I got right here. I'll set that up on my belay loop because I have the ATC extended, so might as well extend it, set it up on your belay loop if it's extended. Now I'll do that first. I'll put on the third hand first, right there. Pull some rope up. Load up my ATC. And I can pull rope through there, pull rope through here, make sure everything's locked, and I can sit down onto this. I'm obviously not going to do that here, but you can see how this is loose. So if I sit down onto this and it holds my weight, that's like my check to make sure that everything's all good. And and I can do one last visual check if I want. I grab brake strand. I'll take my personal anchor off, clip that onto my harness, usually my belay loop if I'm using this anchor, and I can clean. Don't forget this part because everyone's going to laugh at you if you do. Clean that off, clip it to the side, and then rappel down, leaving behind nothing except for the anchors and chains. Alright, so the other method I'm going to show you on cleaning an anchor is called the lower off method. This is, like I said before, this is a common method that you'll see, and it's sort of gaining a lot more popularity in the past couple years. And it's definitely the method that I prefer if I'm with friends because it is a lot faster and just helps your day run smoother overall. So again, first thing I'm going to do is I'm top roping up here. I get to the anchor. First thing I'll do is I'll clip myself in at some point. Again, I'm going to go into the master point because that's redundant on my redundant anchor. And so then I'll test out, make sure that I can sit down in this, which I can. And now, again, just like I like to do, I'm going to just take the rope out of the anchor right away because I don't need it there anymore. Next thing, I'm going to pull up a little bit of rope. Notice how I didn't call off belay. This is the great part about this system is your belayer stays on belay the entire time. What I'm going to do is take a bite of rope. I pulled up, again, pull up a decent amount, a little less, maybe 6 feet or so. But I'm going to take a bite of rope. I'm going to pass it. Oh, this one's not locked. No. Pass it through this carabiner, or sorry, this bottom link of the chain, and then through the other bottom link of the chain. Sometimes you have to really like push it through. Depends a bit on the diameter of your rope. And now you can see I have a bite of rope that I pass through both my chains. And with this, I can either tie an overhand knot or a figure 8 on a bite. I personally like doing figure 8s because they're a bit easier to untie. Now, do you want to go through the pains of making that nice and clean because you are trusting your life to it. Here, I can clip on a locker, another locker. Actually, if I don't have any lockers on me, I can use the lockers from my master point. 2 carabiners, either a locker and a non-locker, or 2 lockers. So there we go, I have my locking carabiner and a non-locker. And so now I'm secured right there. This is a good time to do a visual check. Make sure that this is locked up to a good knot through both chains, and then back down to my belayer. At this point, I can untie my figure 8 knot. Oh, sorry. One thing you could also do if you want to check even more is ask your belayer to take up rope. And if you pull up, you can actually sit down on your setup right here. And that's how you know for sure that you've done it right. It does make this next step a little bit harder though. But next thing, before I start lowering, is I want to untie my original tie-in knot. Yeah, make sure that figure 8 is gone. And then it's nice to actually just pull this through, because it can get trapped while you're lowering your body weight on it. But now that that's pulled through, you see I just have one strand. I asked to take, and my belayer takes me up. I know that this system is now good, right, because this is completely loose. So I can just unclip, there we go, clip this off to my side, and then I can lower down. So you can see that's a lot faster. It's nice because you stay on belay the entire time, and yeah, it's overall much smoother. So it's definitely the method I prefer. So if you were using a personal anchor system to clean any of these anchors in any way, the only, for the lower off method, it would be exactly the same. You would just find a good size loop, clip in, and then sit on that while you're doing all the threading through and tying the knot and lowering off. For rappelling, it'd be slightly different in that when you extend your ATC, you would either clip it to this loop up here, or my personal favorite place is to clip it into the loop down below. So that way it's just about this high off your harness. I personally think that this is like the perfect height. And then I can have my third hand on my belay loop. But other than that, everything's exactly the same. So if you want to use your personal anchor system instead of your double length sling that you made, that's perfectly fine. I personally would use this in a lot of single pitch settings. So that's just that's the only difference there, is just where you clip your ATC into. So that's everything I have for you about how to clean anchors. It's just 2 systems. You want to just practice them until you know them pretty well. If you have any questions, you can throw in the comment section. I'm sure I'm going to get a comment or two about lowering off the chains and how you're not supposed to do it. But just remember that times are changing, and the standard is, even though it's not overtly there yet, it's shifting towards lowering off the chains. So you just got to be ready for the changes that are about to come, and I'm sure someone's going to be saying you never should lower off chains, blah blah blah. They get worn out super fast, but they are pretty cheap to replace. And with all the different organizations out there that are doing rebolting projects, you'll still get plenty of use out of them. And if you really care that much, you can go out and leave some carabiners on the chains or add some steel inserts or whatever, rather than just yelling at me on the keyboard. So I'm sure I just created a lot of controversy there. Sorry guys, I don't want to be stingy or a stickler about it or anything, but just keep an open mind. And if you still feel like commenting and yelling at me for recommending that, then go ahead, and I'll be perfectly happy to read it. So I'll see you guys in the next video, and until then, have fun top roping.